This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
It's time once again for our year-end review and New Year's prediction show. Today I'm going to explain why I think 2017 was the most important year in your life when it comes to your perception of money. But before I do that, and before we make our predictions for 2018, let's take a short look back at 2017. There's no point in making predictions for 2018 if we didn't get our predictions right for 2017. So let's start with a quick review of the predictions we made on show number 122, which aired on December 31st, 2016. To do that, let me welcome back to the show Ted Michalos, my Hoyes Michalos co-founder and business partner. Ted, welcome back. Are you ready to pull out your crystal ball and tell us what's going to happen in 2018?
Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, the big topic in 2017 was real estate. 2016 was a record year for real estate prices. So at the end of 2016, I asked Ted for his thoughts on real estate in 2017. And let me play a clip from that show. Here's what Ted had to say back in December 2016.
Well, so it's hard to predict. We're not real estate experts, but I see interest rates climbing, which will cool off the market a little bit. The government changed mortgage rules, so that should cool off the market a little bit. But there's only so much real estate property available for sale. Toronto is still setting record levels month after month after month. Vancouver's down. Here in Ontario, things are still up.
So there you go. Ted predicted that interest rates would climb, and that would cool off the real estate market. There's no doubt interest rates did increase. The Bank of Canada raised interest rates 1/4 point each in July and September of 2017. Now, whether or not it was the increase in interest rates that cooled off the real estate market is open to debate, but there's no doubt that in many cities in Ontario, including Toronto, prices peaked around May 1st and have been softer since, so I would say that was an accurate prediction. So well done, Ted. You were right on that one.
Thank you very much.
Now, a year ago, we also talked about the insolvency rate because obviously that's what we do at Hoyes Michalos. We help people file personal bankruptcy or a consumer proposal. So last year, I asked you, with debt levels continuing to increase, what do you expect for insolvency rates in 2017? And I'm going to play the clip. Here was your answer from a year ago.
Well, the saving grace for everyone has been that interest rates have been at historic lows. And again, I think that we've seen all the signs now that they're starting to increase. And it won't take very, very big increases to cause dramatic impacts. So overall, what happens in the oil patch will make a big difference to insolvency rates across the country, in Alberta and Newfoundland. I think they're going to go up in Ontario anyway. It may only be moderate, but I would expect them to be 3 to 5%. So we're going to look at 125,000, 130,000 people next year becoming insolvent.
So we are recording this in December 2017, so we obviously don't have a full year of stats yet. But if you look at the numbers up to the end of September, which is the most current data we've got from the government at the time of recording this, the personal insolvency rate in the third quarter of 2017, so that's the 3 months ending September 2017, is up 1.2% in Alberta, 4.8% in Saskatchewan, and is down 0.5% in Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, obviously, that's one quarter, not the entire year, and based on the discussions I've had with my fellow licensed insolvency trustees in Alberta and Newfoundland, I expect those numbers will continue to increase. So I think, Ted, your prediction for increased insolvency numbers in the oil provinces will be proven to be correct. If you look at Canada, for the 12 months ended September 30th, total consumer insolvencies are just over 122,000. So your Canada-wide prediction of 125 to 130,000 for the calendar year is looking pretty good. So I'd say you're 2 for 2 on the oil provinces and Canada as a whole. Now, in Ontario, you and I both predicted rising insolvency rates, and so far we've been totally wrong.
Totally wrong.
Which is strange because Canadians are carrying record levels of debt. Stats Canada data shows that the total household debt in Canada has reached $2.08 trillion. That's a big number.
That's just my wife's credit card.
Ooh! And according to a recent Manulife Bank survey, 1 in 10 homeowners are not sure of who their mortgage provider is. Think about that for a minute. In the same survey, more than half of Canadians said they have good knowledge of debt management, yet debt-to-income levels have reached an all-time high of $1.68 for every dollar earned. So We have record levels of debt, which is why you predicted that insolvency rates in Ontario would rise moderately, perhaps 3 to 5%. But in the third quarter of 2017, they are actually down 3%. And for the first 9 months of the year, insolvency rates in Ontario are down just over 4%. So, what gives? Debt levels are still up, but insolvency rates in Ontario are down. Ted, tell me why.
Well, if you still look at it, we've got this double whammy of low interest rates. And believe it or not, money still is relatively inexpensive. Interest rates are very low. And even though they haven't been increasing, real estate prices are still very, very high. So for an example, a few years ago, the number of our clients that had homes that were filing bankruptcy proposals, the ratio was 1 out of every 3. The ratio now is lower than 1 out of every 6, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that as we go on. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we got record levels of debt, and yet consumer insolvencies in Ontario have fallen for 7 years. And you're right, it's low interest rates and high real estate prices that have been a big contributing factor to that.
Yeah, they can afford the monthly payments, and they can afford to refinance their house if they need to take access to that exit equity.
And as a result, employment is strong too. So if you've got a job, then that also helps. So, okay, so let's look forward now to 2018. A report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, which is basically the Canadian government's watchdog over Canada's financial health, is predicting that interest rates will rise to more normal levels in the next 5 years. I guess you and I aren't economists. We don't have any opinion on that. I mean, what do you think? Is that likely or what?
What we need to understand is what's a normal level. So we've been sitting down at, the bank rate's been less than 3% for years now. Mm-hmm. Normal is closer to 5 or 6. So that's going to be a pretty big shock for people.
Yeah, so if we had to guess, we would assume that, okay, I guess what we saw in 2017 will continue in 2018, but I mean, we don't know for sure.
Yep.
But when you combine higher interest rates with the fact that we're carrying much higher debt levels, that means our debt service ratio, that's what you're just talking about, will be reaching record levels. So
right. It's going to cost you more every month to carry that record level of debt.
So it would appear that the seeds of a financial crisis have been planted. There you go.
I've heard that term before.
There's the title for this show. And now those seeds are being watered in. So what will happen in 2018 that could water in the seeds of a financial crisis? Well, I think there's 3 big things to watch. So Ted, I want you to give me your comments on each of these. So item number 1, in Ontario, the minimum wage is going up. So how much is it going up, and what do you think the impact of that's going to be?
So it's going from $11.60 to $14 per hour effective January 1st, just a few short hours from when people are listening to this program. The first impact is going to be that any employer that's already marginal or have very tight margins is probably going to employ fewer people. Like if your total dollars you have available to spend on payroll are the same and you've got to pay each person more money, you're going to pay fewer people that more money.
Yeah, you've either got to have fewer people or each person is going to work fewer hours.
That's right. And the folks that we see oftentimes now, these are folks that don't have houses that are in these minimum wage jobs. They can't afford to have their hours cut or eliminated altogether. They're already on the edge.
And so it's got a potentially big impact. And I did a show on that a few months ago. And you're right. The way you've got to think of it is exactly the way you said it. If as an employer, I've got this much money to spend on wages, I can't just automatically raise my prices. Now, I guess if it's the big banks that are employing minimum wage people and they make $1 billion every 3 months, then sure, they can afford it. But right. That's not the case in every case. So our guess is that will probably have a negative impact. Certainly if you get laid off as a result of it,
you're going to think that's a negative impact.
That's going to be negative for you. So, and that makes it harder to service your debt. So that could be putting some upward pressure on insolvency rates. So now item number 2, we already mentioned it, debt. So give us some more numbers just to flesh out how bad our situation really is.
All right. So in a recent survey, the Canadian Payroll Association revealed that 49% of Ontarians, so the people living in Ontario, are living paycheck to paycheck, and 43% of Ontarians save less than 5% of their earnings.
So that's pretty scary. And how do we compare to the rest of the world?
Well, so Canadians are the most indebted in the world by at least one measure. Household debt is now more than our GDP.
That's
we
scary.
owe more money than we can possibly make in the entire economy every year.
And I guess that's kind of that's a made-up statistic because it's not like we're paying off the whole GDP every year or anything like that.
Anytime these numbers get so large that people can't get their head around them, it gets difficult to understand. But you know what your paycheck is. And so right now, the average Canadian is carrying 168% of their annual income in debt.
Yeah, and I don't look so much at the absolute numbers as the trend, and the trend is up.
And it's always been up. And it's not raising quickly, but every quarter they publish this number, and it's up another penny. It doesn't take long to get high.
It's obviously a problem. So, okay, then item number 3, and again, we've touched on this already, and I think it's going to be the big one, and that's real estate values and mortgage interest rates. So, mortgage resets and the new mortgage rules, I think, are going to be the two big factors that we see. So, flesh that out for us, Ted. What are we talking about here?
Well, one of the things that's scaring us is that the Bank of Canada predicts that 47% of Canadian real estate mortgages will renew next year. That's half the market. That's a lot of people facing an increase because we know already that interest rates are higher now than they were a year ago, and we're predicting they're going to be higher a year from now. So in Vancouver and Toronto, a 1% increase in mortgage rates would be almost a 10% increase in the amount of money you've got to spend on your mortgage payments every month.
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit about that to actually throw some numbers about there. So, plus we got the new mortgage rules coming in.
Which is, it's confusing people, and it was designed to cool off the market, and that'll have an impact on how much debt people have to service.
And we've talked about it before, but in real simple terms, if you are going for a mortgage, even if you have more than a 20% down payment,
right?
In other words, you don't need mortgage insurance, you're still going to have to qualify as though the interest rate was 2% higher than what you're paying.
Correct.
And I'm oversimplifying that. It's not
quite. The whole idea is that you have to now qualify for a mortgage at a higher rate than you're currently paying in case there's a fluctuation in the market.
Right. So, okay, I'm getting a mortgage at 3.5%, but I got to qualify at 5 or 5.5 or whatever, and that's going to make it more difficult to qualify.
Whatever the 5-year close rate is, and yes, it will. It's designed specifically to make it more difficult to qualify.
Wow. So let's explain it with some numbers then. So let's say that today I can get a 1-year fixed mortgage for 3.29%. I just didn't pick that out of the air. I went on one of those websites and looked. So on a $500,000 mortgage, I'm paying $2,441 a month, which should be on a 25-year amortization. Now, we know, you just said it, about half of Canadian mortgages are going to renew next year. Mm-hmm. So what happens if next year interest rates are 4.29%? Well, I don't know if they're going to go up a full point, but let's use that just to do the math here. Rates increased by half a point in the last 6 months, so I guess it's not impossible that we could have, a few more of those increases next year.
And I think it's likely, actually, but...
So we'll find out. I'll play that clip next year. Ted says it's likely that interest rates will continue to increase. So I'm paying $2,441 a month now. So what would I be paying if rates go up by what they call 100 basis points?
Using that same mortgage calculator, your mortgage payment would go to $2,709 per month on that $500,000.
Well, that doesn't seem like that big an increase.
That's $268 per month, or 11%. Did your pay go up by 11%?
Well, so there's the point, I guess, right?
And suddenly you've got to find $268 a month to spend on your mortgage that you didn't have to spend last month.
Which is not easy to do for most people if your pay isn't going up 10% a year. So, so house prices, have been on the rise.
That's true.
So, I mean, we know that the average price of a home in Ontario is now over $500,000, and in the GTA, we're up into the $1 million range.
Right.
And home ownership much more difficult for everybody. I mean, we know the stats there. I mean, mortgage debt is now 65% of all household debt, and which I guess isn't a problem as long as house prices are going up. But if house prices are going down,
that's always been the selling point, right? Well, your house is going to go up, so grab as much mortgage you can afford.
So what then is the risk of people have been using their house equity to refinance? What happens when it's not there?
Well, so you've got a reasonable rate, a really low rate on your mortgage right now. And so you use the equity in your home to pay off all of your high interest debt, your credit cards, your lines of credit, whatever. So you've got a manageable payment. Well, your house doesn't go up anymore, but you've respent on all those credit cards, those lines of credit. You've got to figure out, where's this money going to come from? There's always the risk that the bubble will burst and your price will adjust by 5-10%. And anything that goes up quickly can come down quickly. And then there's also the risk of, well, what if you need to sell fast? You're going to get less money anyway.
I think that's a huge one, that we don't think of that, house prices are always going up. Yeah, but what if you get transferred to another town, or for some reason you have to sell your house, then you got an issue. So you alluded to this a bit earlier, Ted, the Michalos Homeowners Bankruptcy Index. You know why we call it the Michalos Index? Well, because it's our index. That's why. That's where we came up with it. So you said that historically, like if you go back to 2011, about a third of our clients owned a home at the time they filed.
It was one out of three.
One out of three. And so the last number we did was for the month of November, and the index was
7.9%.
So under 8%, which is not the lowest it's ever been. We got down into the 6% range a couple of months ago, but it's historically very, very low.
That's 1 out of 12.
And in other words, if you own a house, you're probably not going bankrupt or doing a consumer proposal because you've had so much equity to do it.
You've got the opportunity at this point to still refinance and afford the payments to deal with your debts.
So before we get to predictions, here's a few more facts. And again, you kind of alluded to these sorts of things already. 37% of Canadians don't have a steady paycheck.
Right.
And why is that? It's, they're working part-time jobs, that sort of thing.
The whole nature of the workforce has changed. I mean, if you think of the millennials and the young folks entering the workforce, they don't know that they're ever going to have a permanent career with a company. Whereas I think back to my parents and grandparents, grandfather worked for the same tool and die shop his entire life.
Yeah, lifetime jobs just aren't a thing anymore. It just doesn't happen.
And the young kids have got 2 or 3 jobs.
Yeah,
it's just the way the economy works. It's what they can find to pay the bills.
Yeah, and I actually have a lot of empathy for young people today. I mean, I know that as old people, we say, "Oh, young people, in my day, we worked a lot."
We're not old people yet. I keep telling you that
we're not old. We're not old. But yeah, I mean, if you can't find one permanent job, then you end up working 2 or 3 part-time jobs.
Right,
and it's not easy. So
think back to the start of the show when the minimum wage rises January 1st, one of those part-time jobs could disappear, but that's another program.
Yep, and and that's why we're saying these are risks going forward. So one thing we haven't touched on, we've talked about real estate. Tell me about car loans. Where are we at with that? Because I think that's another bubble there too.
Yeah, car loans, some of this stuff is driving me crazy. So they're up 1.5%, which is not a big number, but the average car loan is now over $20,000. And the delinquency rates on cars, it's rising. Bigger problem is people are borrowing for longer periods of time. More than half of all the new car loans are for 84 months or longer.
Okay, 84 months. That's how long is that?
7 years.
7 years. And so 8-year car loans are now common.
Right.
And how many people keep a car for the full 8 years?
Well, almost nobody does. After the 3rd or 4th year, they trade it in, and when there's a shortfall, and there will be, they add it to the next loan. And so now you're paying interest on the shortfall from the car you didn't pay for last time.
So we've got this bubble forming in car loans. I mean, we could talk about installment loans too. I mean, they're up 5% as well, and that's just normal debt.
And credit cards are up too. So
okay, everything is up. So that we've kind of set the stage for what 2018 looks like. So okay, let's get into predictions then. So consumer debt levels, well, I guess you've already predicted that, yep, they're just going to keep going up.
It's pretty safe. So we're telling you now that the last public figure was $1.68 for every dollar of disposable income. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of 18 it's $1.70.
Yep. So there you go. There's a hard number, and you draw it on a graph. That's almost inevitable.
And it should scare the hell out of you people.
It ain't pretty. Well, so okay, what about the big question, real estates, mortgages? I mean, you've already said you think mortgage rates are going to go up.
Well, yes, I think mortgage rates are going to go up, and that's between that and the new mortgage rules that's going to have a cooling off effect on real estate values. I get that they're not making any more land, but a house is only worth so much, and there has to be somebody able to buy your house when you're ready to sell it.
Yeah, and if I'm using more of my income to service my debt, and if I can't qualify for as big a mortgage, and if interest rates are going up, then that's just got to continue to put downward pressure on real estate.
It's got to.
And so I assume you expect car loans to keep going up too?
Now, I think that we're going to be in another market because of the other things that are happening, that we'll see more of these deals, 0 and low interest car loans. And you got to recognize, folks, when a company does that, the cost of borrowing is built into the cost of the car. You're not actually getting a deal. It's just the way they're marketing it to you. People are going to finance more and more of their cars.
Yeah, ask what would it be if you paid cash for it, and then you could see. So,
right.
And then final prediction, then consumer insolvency rates.
Yeah, and we were wrong about Ontario, right about Canada. I'm fairly confident that we're going to be right about Ontario in 18, and the rates are going to go up.
So there you go. There's the prediction. I mean, they've been going down for like 7 straight years. So actually predicting an increase in insolvency rates in 2018 it's
an unfortunate but safe bet.
Yeah. So, but again, it hasn't happened for 7 years. So it's actually a more radical prediction than it sounds like. So we'll come back in a year and see. So, I mean, I agree with you on all those points. I think debt levels are going to continue to increase, softer real estate market, higher debt services costs. And I think as a result, yes, insolvency rates will rise. So as I say, we'll talk about that next year and see how close we were. Now, at the start of the show, I said that I thought that 2017 was the most important year in your life when it comes to your perception of money. Now, I know that's kind of a crazy statement because this might not have been the year that you bought a house or got a new job. So without knowing anything about you, why do I think that 2017 was the most important year in your life? Well, it's because I believe that 2017 was the year that your view of reality changed. Now, let me explain. So, Ted, I want you to kind of play along with me here. We're gonna do a little role play. We're gonna do a little play for the audience here. So what I want you to do is I want you to play the part of an average Canadian. And I know you're Ted Michalos, you're not an average Canadian, but you're going to play the part of an average Canadian. So here we go. So let's pretend it's the year 2016. Okay. It's a year ago. So my question to you, Ted Michalos, average Canadian, have you ever heard of Equifax?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So what do they do?
Lots of stuff. It's they sell credit reports and they keep track of my credit score, right?
Okay. So you could go to Equifax and buy your credit score.
In fact, I think they can give it to me free if I'm willing to do the paperwork and wait for it in the mail.
Not your credit score.
Oh, you're right. That's right. Yep.
Your credit report you can get for free, but your credit score you have to pay for, I don't know, it's
$20 or
$20 or what. Okay. Yep. So you can buy your credit report and your credit score from Equifax, so that makes you a customer of Equifax, right?
Sure, that makes sense. I'm buying something from them. I'm their customer.
That's what a customer is. So there you go. That was Ted Michalos, average Canadian, describing his view of reality in 2016. His view of reality was that he was a customer of Equifax. So now, Ted, it's the end of 2017. You're still Ted Michalos, average Canadian. Tell me what you know happened to Equifax in 2017.
I'm pretty sure they were hacked and most of my data was spread around the world.
Bad stuff happened. Bad stuff happened. So do you trust Equifax?
No, not one scintilla.
And neither does anyone else. So now we get to the key question. You don't trust Equifax because they had this big data breach and it would appear that they didn't do enough to prevent it. Well, obviously they didn't because it happened. So you, like all other Canadians, have thought a lot about Equifax this year. Last year, you perceived that you were a customer of theirs if you bought your credit score from them.
Yep.
So what's your perception today? Who is Equifax customer?
Well, so I figured out this year that I'm not their customer anymore. I'm what they're selling. I'm Equifax's product.
And that's a key difference. And of course, it's not just you. I mean, I think everyone else has come to that.
I'm the average Canadian.
That's
now,
right.
I'm
Absolutely.
still role-playing here.
But I think that's kind of typical of what everyone else would say too.
Right.
Being a customer is a totally different reality than being a product. But now you realize that Equifax customers are the big banks that they sell your data to.
Right.
And I think that's why Equifax wasn't too worried about the security of your data, because they don't have to worry about upsetting you. It's more, is the bank upset? That's their customer. I mean, you talk to clients all the time. What do they tell you about when you get an error on your credit report, you try to call Equifax?
And nobody's ever been happy with the whole credit reporting system. Like, if you've got a mistake, you fill out a form, you put it in the request, and they'll follow up on it. But of course, if the company that made the mistake in the first place reports it wrong again, the next month you're back where you started. So there's no customer service there. There never has been.
And that's because you're not really their customer.
Right. We've only just figured that out.
Yeah. If you were their primary customer, then I guess they would have to put a lot more resources into it. And I'm going to do a show in 2018 on a totally new way to be assessing credit scores and credit risk and everything using the blockchain, but that's all I'm going to tease for it on now. So, okay, there have been other data hacks. I mean, there was one at Uber, same deal. Your perceptions of them have probably changed too. So a year ago, you never worried about your data being secure, but today, well, yeah, you do. And I mean, I had a client come in to see me a few weeks ago, and this is an older guy. He's in his 60s. He didn't have a fax machine. He asked me to fax a document to someone, and I said, yeah, sure, no problem. But then he said to me, I sure hope it's secure.
Yeah.
Now, here's a guy who a year ago wouldn't have thought twice about security, but now he's worried about the security of a fax machine.
Yep.
So again, a total different perception of reality. Now, let me give you a better example, because I think there's an even better example of this. So again, Ted, let's think back to your childhood. When you were a kid, you walked into a bank, and who was the person you talked to?
The teller.
Okay, and what was their job back then?
So they would be pleasant with me. They'd cash my check. They'd handle my deposit, give me cash, whatever I wanted to do.
Real simple.
Yep.
So now, of course, when you walk into the bank, if you can even find a branch that hasn't been closed, you talk to a customer service representative, and what's their job?
Yeah, well, they're trying to sell me something, some kind of product that the bank's got.
Exactly. So the CBC ran a big story earlier this year, and we talked about it on the show, revealing that the customer service representatives at the TD Bank, was the one they were doing the story on, had sales quotas each month. They have a target to sell a certain number of new credit cards or loans or lines of credit to their customers. So that's why when you go to the bank and put your card in the little machine there, and they punch in your PIN, and the bank person says, "Oh, Mr. Hoyes, congratulations, you qualify for a new credit card," or whatever the deal is. So, have you ever had that happen to you at the bank?
I'll tell you, this happens to my wife all the time. So she's pretty tight with her credit limits and the like, because she's had problems with frauds on the internet. So she's got a $1,000 credit card for internet shopping, and then her $10,000 card for other time shopping. And at least once a month, when she's in the branch, it's, "Oh, I see, Mrs. Michalos, that you've only got a limit of $10,000. Would you like us to increase your limit for you? Or would you like us to extend your line of credit? You don't seem to be using it. You could make purchases on that and save interest." It just drives her crazy. And of course, she tells it to me, so it'll drive me crazy.
And a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it would have been like, "Oh, that's nice that the bank's looking out for me." But now it's like, yeah, okay, I know what the deal is.
Well, you know what? The evolution is interesting. If you think back 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago, every week in the mail, you got 3 or 4 credit card applications. Now you get this personal touch when you're in the bank. So the teller knows your net worth because they've got your information on the screen. They know what products to try to sell you. It's much more sophisticated.
Or creepy.
Yes, it's Facebook. But.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Facebook knows everything about you, and so do the bank. It is kind of creepy. So my point is, you used to walk into the bank thinking you were talking to Mary who was going to cash your check. Now you know that you're talking to a salesperson. And it's not like banks are the only place that do this. In some situations, it's obvious, if you go to a store, that you're talking to a salesperson. But now, when you go to the bank, you're also talking to a salesperson. When you have a problem with your cell phone and you call the cell phone company, you aren't just talking to someone who's going to hopefully solve your problem. You're talking to someone who'll also try to sell you a new service plan or a new phone or whatever.
Right.
Is your financial advisor your advisor, or are they a salesperson? Well, if they make their money by selling you mutual funds, they're a salesperson. And there's nothing wrong with that. They got to get paid somehow. But I think now we're all much more aware of the nature of that relationship. So, I could give many more examples, but I think you get my point. The events of 2017 have caused us to see reality differently. And I think that's a good thing. So, Ted, what's your perception of reality? Am I right here?
The point you're really making is now we are all much more aware of how valuable our personal information and data is, and that there are people out there behind the scenes making an awful lot of money off it. And of course, their chief concern is making that money, not necessarily your safety, your security, what's best for you.
And that's why you have to follow the money.
Yeah, and it's the old rule. Nobody's going to look after your interests better than you. Never assume that anybody, bank, credit card company, cell phone, whomever, are after your best interests. They might be pitching you something that will save you a little bit of money, but overall it's going to make them more money. It's their interest, not yours.
Which is fine.
Yep.
Businesses are there to make money, but you want to make sure that you're looking out for your interest too. Make sure you understand how the money is flowing, who's getting paid. So anything else from 2017 we got to talk about?
Well, we haven't touched the most important event of the year. We had the publication of the Doug Hoyes' book, Straight Talk on Your Money.
Yes,
straight to the bestsellers
list. That was definitely the high point.
How do people get a copy of that book?
At bookstores everywhere, Amazon, whatever. So, and one of the themes of that book was exactly that, reality. You gotta. It isn't always what you think it appears. So we're getting close to our 30-minute. I like to keep these shows to 30 minutes, which is why we call them Debt Free in 30. So we're going to close it there. We didn't get to the next obvious issue, which is what should I do in 2018? Like if I have debts, which one should I pay first? Should I renew my mortgage for a year or 5 years or whatever? So Ted, I'm going to ask you back next week for a quicker show to discuss your action plan for 2018. So Ted, until next week, thanks for being here.
Great. See you then.
That's our show for today. We covered a lot of ground, and I've got around a dozen links to everything we discussed today. So if you want to fact check us to make sure we weren't giving you fake news, please go to hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com, where we've got a full transcript of today's show and links to everything we discussed. Until Ted Michalos and I pick it up again next week, thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.